Polio is an infectious disease that is caused by a virus that lives in the throat and intestinal tract. It also invades the nervous system. Anyone can be affected, but children under the age of 5 are at the highest risk. Countries that have an endemic are Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nigeria. Importation countries also can have infections from importation of the polio virus. These countries are the ones that go from West Africa to the Horn of Africa. In early 1900s, the polio was one of the most feared diseases in industrialized countries, where it killed thousands of children each year. The vaccine in the 1950s through 60s brought polio under control for these industrialized countries. However, for developing countries, it continued to be a problem for longer, and was a prevalent disease in the 1970s for these countries. When immunization was introduced to these countries, it assisted in controlling polio. Until transmission of polio ends, every country will remain in jeopardy. There is no cure for polio, and we can only alleviate symptoms. However, 90% of people are asymptomatic, while only 10% suffer from fever, headache, fatigue, vomiting, stiffness of the neck, and pain in the limbs. There are more severe cases, which occur in 1 in 200 people. Paralysis can occur within hours, and is usually in the legs. This polio paralysis cannot be treated. Acute flaccid paralysis is when the virus enters the central nervous system and multiplies while destroying nerve cells that stimulate those muscles. The muscles then lose functionality. Bulbar polio is a more intense form of paralysis which involves the throat and abdomen. The virus attacks nerve cells of the brain, which reduces the ability to breathe, speak, or swallow. 5% to 10% of people die when breathing muscles lose functionality. Immunization can prevent polio. A series of vaccines given to children provides protection for life. There are 2 kinds of vaccines, IPV, which is inactivated poliovirus vaccine, or OPV, live oral poliovirus vaccine. Polio was common in the United States and affected thousands of people each year before the polio vaccine in 1955. Children receive 4 doses of IPV at 2 months, 4 months, 6 to 18 months, and then a booster dose at 4 to 6 years. Since 2000, OPV has not been used in the United States, but is still used in other parts of the world where polio endemic or high transmission still occur. Vaccine-associated paralytic poliomyelitis is why OPV has not been used in the United States since 2000, since the risk of using it outweigh the potential benefit. Immunization of every child can stop transmission until polio is eradicated. Transmission occurs person to person by feces of the infected person. Areas with poor sanitation or hygiene allow polio to spread quickly. Young children are most at risk. These children are not toilet trained and can easily contaminate food or water. Flies also can carry the feces to food and contaminate it with polio. Many people never exhibit symptoms, so they silently carry the disease and unknowingly affect others. Because of this, the WHO considers a single case of polio paralysis indication of an epidemic, especially in countries who rarely have cases of the disease. Calloway talks about Nigeria and says that the country does not have a working public health care system, and some local government officials are less than committed to the cause. In urban centers in the north, widespread distrust of the government leads many parents to refuse vaccination for their children. What is more, in February, several polio workers were murdered for unknown reasons at health clinics in Kano, northern Nigeria's largest city. Nomads include hundreds of thousands of children who have not received any or all of their polio vaccines. These nomads are a polio reservoir, and they spread polio through the country while they migrate. In June of 2012, the National Stop Transmission of Polio program began. They started a census of nomads as part of a global emergency action plan against polio. Eradication of polio cannot occur unless all nomads are vaccinated. India has solved the nomad problem by offering vaccines at train stations for nomads. There is also a Taliban opposition in Afghanistan. They have killed 11 polio vaccinators in Afghanistan, Nigeria, and Pakistan in the past year. Taliban leaders recently issued statements saying that they would support polio vaccination if vaccinators were not foreigners and would respect the local Islamic culture and values. 46,000 volunteers have been trained to conduct the campaign to immunize over 8 million children in Afghanistan. The current eradication plans for polio are to have polio eradicated by the year 2018. Their first goal is to detect and interrupt all poliovirus transmission. The second is to strengthen immunization systems and withdraw oral polio vaccine. The third is to contain polio and certify interruption of transmission. The fourth is to plan polio's legacy. The WHO states that polio cases have decreased by over 99% since 1988, from an estimated 350,000 cases in more than 125 endemic countries then to 223 reported cases in 2012. They also say that more than 10 million people are today walking who would otherwise have been paralyzed. The WHO predicts that eradication of polio would save at least $40 to $50 billion over the next 20 years, mostly in low-income countries. It is most important, though, that this success will mean that no child will ever again suffer the terrible effects of lifelong polio paralysis. It is important to remember that polio is not an eradicated infectious disease, and that it is crucial to immunize every child until the transmission of polio ends.